Streaming services are on the rise, and brick-and-mortar video stores are a thing of the past. We have lost that experience of wandering the aisles and stumbling upon a film we've never heard of. We have replaced the familiar face behind the video store counter with an algorithm to recommend films. With more and more content available, it's harder to know what's worth watching and what might be a waste of your time. There are many hidden gems out there waiting to be discovered, and we want to help you find them. This is Trailer Rewind, a podcast where we discuss and review recently forgotten or overlooked films that are now available to stream at home. Once in a blue moon, I get a chance to talk with Andy Nelson about a movie. The Nice Guys, Raw, and now today, 2019's Les Misérables, which is not an adaptation of the Victor Hugo novel. Hey Andy, how you doing?
I am great, and I'm excited to talk about this movie with you.
Well, it was your pick from November 2nd, 2019.
Maybe that's why I'm so excited to talk about it. Because I got to pick it.
You got to pick it. And now you said it was inspired by the 2005 riots in Paris and the personalities of the three main police officers, and that it felt very current, and you like the tension and the situations. Director Laj Lee was inspired by Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing and La Haine. Pete said it looked like season 6 of The Wire, but in French. And I said, I hope it didn't get remade in America as Training Day 2. So today is November 2nd, 2020. So 1 year to the day. 1 year to the day, Andy, from when you picked this as your trailer, we are talking about Les Misérables, which is currently available on Amazon Prime.
J'en appelle à votre esprit d'équipe, la cohésion. Sans cohésion, pas d'équipe. Et sans équipe, on est seul.
T'as pas choisi la bonne équipe, mon pote, hein.
Contrôle de police. Vous faites quoi, là?
On attend le bus.
Vous attendez le bus, là? Ça sent le shit, ça.
Eh, c'est bon, Souli.
Je vous filme, vous avez pas le droit de faire ça.
Arrête de filmer.
Non.
T'es contente, là?
Ici, c'est notre vie.
Well, this opened in France on November 20th, 2019, sorry, and expanded globally January and February 2020, making $18 million. Now, it's always difficult to find a lot of information about box office and all of that when we're dealing with international markets, but I could not find any information about this film being available here in the US on Blu-ray or DVD or anything. It appears that this is one that Amazon picked up, and it is only exclusively available on Amazon Prime. So, as I will say, for those of you that like to collect your physical media, this is one that you're not going to get. This is streaming only from Amazon Prime.
It is, yeah. It's an interesting thing because Netflix has certainly shifted and has started making physical media available. I mean, it's been going on for quite a while. I shouldn't say it's like a recent thing. They've been doing it almost since they started putting out original content. I mean, all of their stuff's been out in physical media. They just, like anything else, usually wait a year or something before they do so. And now they have a deal with Criterion, so their big films like The Irishman and Roma are going straight to Criterion when they do get released in physical media. So it's nice to see them taking that path to allow for that. It's interesting that Amazon has chosen not to do that. And I mean, yeah, they're especially now, I know we're not here to talk about Amazon and all of the stuff, but just with the recent news that they have about purchases through Amazon and everything. So it's interesting that that's where we start with this one.
Well, I think with Amazon having that whole digital distribution model, the question would be, and for a movie like this, I would say I can't imagine there would be a large market for actually physical copies of this that would justify the cost of going into, actual manufacture and distribution of physical discs and the printing and all of those pieces when it's something they can host on their servers and people can rent it or buy it, or they're paying for it through their Amazon Prime subscription. Amazon's reducing its overhead. And I could just imagine a warehouse with, boxes of these DVD or Blu-rays of this just sitting there because it's not a film that, I think a lot of people were eager to see in the mainstream audiences. It's a foreign film, so it's not one that I would anticipate, and not any names that I recognized. I'm not a huge cinephile when it comes to French films, so I don't know if these are like name actors over there, but it wasn't something that was familiar to me.
Well, that's what I was going to say is potentially a reason why that Amazon hasn't, because like Manchester by the Sea, which was another one of theirs, did get physical copy distribution. It just may be that it was part of the distribution deal, and it just falls to distribution, and it's a whole other conversation. But in the world of distribution, especially when you're dealing with foreign language films and doing distribution in other countries, they're cutting whatever deals make sense for them. And it's I would imagine in a case like this that the production companies behind this film said, it doesn't make sense for us to push physical media over there. Let's just get a deal with Amazon and we'll just pump it out through that. So it makes sense.
Yeah. So this film, knowing that people may just come across it on Amazon Prime, they're scrolling through this comes up. Who is this film for? I mean, my response was, I hope they don't make it as, Training Day 2. So I, back when we saw the trailer, saw some similarities to Training Day. Is this a film that you think somebody that's a fan of Training Day would enjoy? Is this a typical cop movie? If because we've all been talking about, what was it, Bad Boys 3, being the top grossing, movie of 2020 in the U.S. So if you're a fan of Bad Boys, is this a type of film that might appeal to you?
I don't think so. But I do think that there is an element to kind of the docu-style cop thriller that's a little more tough, a little more gritty. I think that there are films that fit. Training Day, I do think that there is an element that fits with the context of this, even though that feels much more scripted, and this feels scripted, but it doesn't feel scripted in the same way that something like Training Day does. But Training Day, I'm thinking of some of the grittier kind of cop films where it just feels like you're in the life with these people, like even going into something like Narc or something. There's an element of that raw, gritty feel with some of the handheld camera work that you have in this. So I suppose that's what I would say. I mean, it feels like a cop thriller. It definitely has that vibe. There's a lot of dramatic elements to it in relation to the way that the story plays out. I feel like there's a much stronger message in the course of this film than you get in some of those other cop films, but I don't think that's going to keep people away from it. I think the way it wraps up might turn those people off afterward, but I think in context of the film itself, I think it's an incredibly strong and interesting film with really interesting police characters. And I think that's something else, if you're watching cop films to see, good cops, then it may not be the film for you, because we're watching cops who are, it's kind of the Training Day despicable cop sort of characters.
It reminded me, I don't know if you ever saw End of Watch, David Ayer's film with...
it's been on my list for so long, and I still
Michael
haven't been
Pena
able to watch it.
and Jake Gyllenhaal,
Yeah,
but
right.
it has that similar gritty, we're in the streets, clearly it's the cops that are sort of embedded in these troubled neighborhoods and have to be, law enforcement, but also have to deal with strong criminal elements and have to negotiate peace with that. And so that was one that it reminded me of, because it was one that had been on my list for years and years and years, and I finally got around to watching earlier this year. And it has that gritty, like right there in the streets type of feel to it. And this reminded me a lot of that. So I would say if you're a fan of those David Ayer cop films, this might be something that you would be interested in with that gritty aspect to it.
Certainly.
So you said, this may not be a film for everybody. How did it end up on your rankings, on your Flick chart, your Letterboxd, your whatever other rating systems Andy Nelson has for ranking and rating his movies?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just speaking specifically to the film, I found it to be an incredibly compelling story. I loved the characters. I mean, our new kind of rookie, I'll call him a rookie, even though he's not a rookie, but he's a rookie to this area cop. Like, I found him to be, he's the perfect character to be the one that I identify with, because I was right there with him through the bulk of this story. I was as frustrated as he was with these other two cops. that are just they're bad cops. You know, I was completely compelled by the story, by the characters. I found everybody incredibly interesting, and everything worked for me. It ended up very high for me. It ended up at a 4.5 out of 5 on my Letterboxd ranking over there at letterboxd.com/Soda Creek Film. And on Flickchart, when I rank it over there, it ended up in spot 141 out of 4,504. So it ended up at a 97%, really, really high. And that's after two viewings. I find this to be incredibly compelling from start to finish.
I'm right there with you. It is solid 4.5 star film for me. It is just, there was something about the pacing of the story. And, you know, if I have to summarize everything in this, I mean, it's a very simple story to summarize. There's not a lot that happens, but there's such complexity to all the characters and this world that is built that just made it such a rewarding watch to go along this very basic journey of just, you know, get from point A to B or obtain this item, but it's not that simple because of the characters. And for me, that's the rewarding piece of the dynamic between our team of 3, the neighborhood that they're in, all the players in the neighborhood, even, you know, early on, the expectation that sort of the commander or captain puts in place of what her expectations are for our new, you know, team member. All of these elements just were woven together so well that it was I always hate saying it's enjoyable watch because it's a tough watch, and it's harrowing and it's emotional and it's a thrilling roller coaster ride. I hate to use that, you know, cliche, but it's got ups and downs. And just when I think the story is sort of like wrapping itself up, or we're getting it launches into this final act, that is, this final moment is just really, really compelling and left me with a lot to think about. So for me, it ended up in number 48 out of 648 movies, which I don't have the percentages in front of me, but it's clearly way up in, you know, my top films in my top 50. So definitely one that I will probably watch again and again and again, because I feel there's something very rewarding in going along the journey with these characters. And the general consensus out there is right there with us. It has a weighted average review on Letterboxd of 3.79 out of 5, based on 19,635 reviews. So, you know, creeping up on 4 stars. Over at IMDb has 7.6 stars based on 16,666 votes. What's interesting is I had watched this film the first time a couple months ago and had made some notes, and the ratings stayed the same, but the number of reviews had each increased by about 3,000 on IMDb and over at Letterboxd, but they stayed basically where they are. So I feel like this is sort of, they found their home zone of where they're going to reside over at IMDb and Letterboxd. And if you know your ratings over at IMDb, 7.6 is, you know, that puts it up in I think an upper echelon of films that makes it really clearly something that the fans there think is definitely worth watching. So listeners, if you think this is your kind of film and you don't want anything spoiled, this is your chance to pause the podcast and check out Les Misérables over on Amazon Prime. And we're back, Andy. We can get into the nitty-gritty of this nitty-gritty story here. Okay.
The Lion Cub did it.
The Lion Cub did it. So, I mean, this is a film, this is what I don't like. I don't want to spoil for people, you know, when I tell them about this, but I get so excited about it because the film keeps like ratcheting up the tension. It just, from the beginning, it just keeps going and just keeps getting tenser and tenser. And there's little like release valves along the way, but I feel like that for me, that was the joy of the movie. So I don't want to tell people about these great moments unless they've seen it, because I feel like it would deflate the tension that the film is building, because it just is so well architected in how we just work our way through the story, which is, as we mentioned in the front, we've got this new member of the team, Ruiz, joining the team, and he's moved to the city. It's, a family thing, whatever. It's
right.
Doesn't matter. He's the new guy, and he's on the team, right?
It matters to a certain extent.
Well,
we'll just put an asterisk to that because we'll find that out later. Yes,
but he's the new guy on the team, and we get early on as he gets into the station. It's there's the typical competition of like, oh, you're with those guys, you should join us out on the night team. That's where the real action is, this and that. And the captain comes in.
Right.
Yeah, the captain comes in and says, look, here's my expectations. We sort of do things by the book, but also that it's important for the, to be part of the team, because if we aren't working together, we're not a team. And if we're not a team, we're all in this alone, all that. So setting this expectation that's going to play into the tension that with that team of, because we've already seen these guys are just sort of they tread on the, in the gray areas a lot, but the captain, says the team is important, but, don't do anything that's going to cause trouble. And clearly that's not going to work for us. We get the sense from that already from these two guys that have, they nickname him, Greaser, the Greaser,
right. Yeah.
Right. From the beginning, they're going to give him a nickname. They're hazing him. We've got all of that stuff. And for me, that's the training day piece that I got out of it, of like, the Ethan Hawke rookie, and I'm here with the veteran. He's going to show me the ropes of the neighborhood. But these two guys have been doing this. They say it's been 10 years that they've been working this neighborhood, so they know the people, and that's Chris and Gwada. And Chris is what's his? He's like he's got the desk with all the like pigs, on it, all of that stuff. He's like embraced that whole thing of like cop as pig, of like that's the insult. I'm going to embrace that. I don't care. I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it around. And they have such like ego and attitude and
it's ridiculous. He is just terrible. And I just have to mention that Alexis Menentai plays Chris, and he totally is like an Ethan Embry lookalike. Like every time I look at him, I'm like, I feel like he's stepped out of That Thing You Do 10 years later with A Rougher Life, and here he is now as a policeman in Paris. He just totally feels like it's the same person, which is funny. But he is the embodiment of that training day, that cop character who runs this neighborhood by creating fear in everybody. And you can tell because when they walk away and we're still with the characters, they're talking about how much they hate them and just they're awful and all this sort of stuff. So you get this real sense that everybody hates Chris and Gwada. Okay. But they just have to take it because they're the policemen in this particular neighborhood, which we should say it's not a great neighborhood. It's the commune of Montfermeil. I'm not sure how you pronounce that properly, but as they do point out, it is the neighborhood where Jean Valjean meets Cosette in Les Miserables. The novel Les Miserables, yes. Right.
So yes, it's a ghetto type area. I mean, it's not working class. It's people that are struggling to get by. And soon after we have that scene in the police station, then they go out on patrol and we get our sort of tour of the neighborhood, and we get to meet all of the people that are part of, what Chris and Gwada, they're sort of their neighborhood that they patrol. And so they know all the people. And so we get the little introduction of the neighborhood, and we get to know the environment, who the key players are. And we've got a lot of things going on there. We get the scene early on there where they're just cruising along and there's the girls smoking cigarettes. And we get this whole, the hostility, I don't know, the tension that just, or lack of respect that like Chris has for the people that he's supposed to be keeping safe, just like there's no.
Well, he's clearly a person who abuses his power.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yes, he's got that. So we get a sense of, that right away. And then the other important piece that's going to come up is the kids in the neighborhood. And we meet this kid, Buzz, who's got a drone that he, how he got the drone, I don't know.
Right.
In this neighborhood where, high poverty, but he's got a drone that he uses to, he's a teenage boy. He's going to spy on cute girls and, through the windows and things like that. But we get that introduction of, he's got that, and the kids know he has that. And that's going to be a key plot point later on. Then we get to sort of the, like, open air marketplace, and we meet the mayor, who is he been elected the mayor? No, I don't think so. Is he a gangster that just has influence? It's not really clear, but he is a figure of authority and respect, and people go to him. He keeps things moving along smoothly, as far as we can tell, in this big apartment complex there, and that's the mayor, right?
And they say something like that, like he kind of helped clean up the place because at one point there were other elements in there, a lot of drugs or something, and he kind of cleaned it up, and now he kind of, quote, runs the town,
right?
And so he's an interesting character in the way that he handles things, but even he's not the only one.
No, he's not. And then, well, we get sort of our first crucial plot point as we're at that sort of big shopping bazaar, and all of a sudden there's some big ruckus coming through, and we've got this, van or vehicle, whatever, from the zoo, who is screaming, through their loudspeakers. The circus. Yes, you're right. The circus, screaming, cursing at everybody because, as we found out, one of their, what's his name? Johnny. Johnny's been taken.
Johnny.
Somebody came in and took Johnny. And so, Chris is like, well, what? He took one of your people? No, it's a lion cub. Right. So somebody has gone to the circus and taken Johnny from the circus, and we find out Johnny is the lion cub. So now there's threats now. Something's gonna, if this isn't taken care of, if the mayor doesn't help take care of this, then Zorro and his team, they've invested all this money, somebody in his neighborhood has taken his property, and there's going to be trouble. And so again, we get our tension being ratcheted up a little bit, because it's already, there is order, but just percolating beneath the surface of that, there's a potential for a lot of violence right away.
Right, because we have all of these elements, and I know there's a few more to introduce, but it's just like each one of them have kind of their own motivation and their own angle, and really there's 6 different elements at play here, and they all kind of are coming to a head over this whole issue that is created because of this lion cub, Johnny, getting stolen from the circus.
So to get a lead on who might have Johnny, Chris is they're gonna take a little trip, and they're gonna give Ruiz, the greaser, a little task, and they pull up in front of a little restaurant. They tell him, you're gonna go in here, you're gonna go talk to Sala, and you're gonna find out what you can about this lion cub. And for me, this is a really pivotal scene, because the character of Sala is another player in the community, but
he's the head of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. So he's got a much more spiritual take on everything, and the interaction that he has with Ruiz, for me, just sort of sets a very interesting and different tone for a leader in the community.
We have a moment earlier when we're with Buzz, the kid with the drone, and his friends, as they get stopped by some of Salah's men, who are some of the Muslims that are talking to these kids about being kind of disruptive and stuff, and follow the right path and all that sort of stuff. And it's an interesting element, so because we see how these different groups are kind of interacting and working at finding ways to get the people, generally starting with the youngest, to kind of be with them. And this is a good example of Salah's people kind of doing their job of recruiting the kids to kind of be on their side.
Yes, and it's very much about power and control, and in this community where the kids are and everything. So we're going to have a little clip here of this scene with Ruiz meeting Salah, and we get Salah's sort of mystical take on what the lion represents.
Bonjour. Mes collègues pensent que vous pouvez peut-être avoir des informations au sujet d'un vol.
Quels renseignements vos collègues sont désireux de connaître?
Un jeune lion a été volé là dans un cirque qui vient de s'installer en ville, et les propriétaires de ce cirque voudraient le retrouver assez rapidement. Et ils soupçonnent un jeune de la cité, un individu de type africain. Donc peut-être que vous ou les personnes ici présentes, vous avez peut-être entendu parler ou vu quelque chose qui serait en rapport avec ce lion. Non?
Crois-tu que la place d'un lion soit dans un cirque? Dans l'islam, le lion est un animal majestueux qui incarne force et grandeur. Les hommes ne devraient pas mettre en cage un animal aussi sage.
On est d'accord, mais le mieux, c'est quand même qu'il retrouve son propriétaire assez vite. Et c'est fragile, c'est un jeune lion. Ce serait bien qu'il retourne là où on peut le soigner, le nourrir, tout ça.
Depuis quand est-ce aux hommes de nourrir les lions? Les lions ne savent-ils pas chasser et se nourrir par eux-mêmes? L'homme crée des contraintes là où il ne devrait pas en exister. Cela s'appelle la servitude. Sais-tu ce que dit un lion lorsqu'il rugit? Oh Allah! Faites que je ne m'attaque pas à quelqu'un qui agit avec bienfaisance. Mange en paix. C'est offert par la maison. Salam alaikum.
So what I thought really interesting is, and I don't know if it was the choice. This is where I think about the power of good storytelling and picking good elements in your story. Because from the trailer, I thought, why is there a lion in a neighborhood? Where did this come from? The fact that there's a circus in town, but the fact that when Salah, his description of what the lion says when it roars, that it says, "Oh Allah, may he who is benevolent be protected from my claws." This whole idea of what this lion, this, as everybody knows, is a dangerous animal, and the power and sort of hinting at, there's within that community, the Muslim Brotherhood, they, could they also be the lion that's going to rise up? There's so many different layers to the possibilities for violence in here. So that, we get our players. There's another important player that's going to come up a little bit later in the story, but these are our main, we've got between the mayor and Salah and the Muslim Brotherhood and
the police
and
then it's just the roaming group of kids.
Kids,
like,
right? The mob of kids, right?
Yeah, there's kids everywhere in this neighborhood, and they are definitely one of the 6 elements that are important, because we've seen the police talking to them. We've seen kind of them interacting with some of the girls. We've seen the kids talking to each other, and just these different groups talking to them and interacting with them, because they, like kids, they just kind of, rove in packs. They're their own little beings at this point, and are being molded constantly.
Yes. Oh yeah. And the fact that it's the sort of the gang of kids is important, because Chris, they soon find out where the lion is. They find out that one of these kids, Issa, has the lion. They see it on like a social media post.
Yeah, Instagram. He posted. And his friend posted or something.
Right, on Instagram. So they're like, oh, okay. So there's a whole like, let's track down Issa to try. There's a great scene going to his house, the conversation with the mother, where we get a lot more insight into the differences between Chris and how he handles things and how Gwada handles things. And for me, that was a really powerful scene with the mother in negotiating that sort of peace when you have the police, coming in instead of being the threat of, how do you manage that to say, well, I need this person on my side. We need that information from her, so I can't just go in, cracking skulls, right?
Yeah. And it's an interesting, like when they find out that it's Issa, it's interesting anyway, because we've already been introduced to Issa. And we should just say the film starts with Issa. He's dressed almost like a superhero, right? He's wearing the flag. He's going out with his friends and the whole group, and they're going to the World Cup, the 2018 World Cup, to watch this and watch France win. And this is a moment where everybody is together. And that's what it's like, an amazing way to start this film. You start with this kid being empowered as this superhero. He's great. Right. And then the next time we meet him, it's when we're at the police station, and his dad or his stepfather, I'm not exactly sure of their relationship, but he's like he's throwing him at the cops, saying, take him, I'm sick of this kid. All he does is cause problems. He was stealing chickens, yada, yada, yada. It was this like really interesting way to go, oh, wait, this was the kid at the start that was so happy. Yeah. Now he's here. His father or stepfather is like dumping him at the police station. So clearly there's some issues going on. And then we find this out, that he's the one who stole the lion.
Right. And reflecting back on when we see him early in the police station that he was stealing chickens, clearly he's stealing chickens to feed the lion, right? You know,
right.
why would
as we see him trying that
right.
little later in the movie, right?
Right. So we've got to find Issa. So we track him down. There are a bunch of kids that are like out on the basketball court or whatever, and so you've got three police officers
playing soccer, right?
Or soccer, you know. 3 police officers outnumbered by 50, 60 kids that they're going to try. And of course, you know, if a small group, you can grab a kid, but now it's a large group of kids that are going to help, you know, defend Issa, right? So that it's not easy to just, hand him over. We need to talk with him. It becomes messy, and Gwada pulls out his big pepper spray canister and gets rushed by the mob. He gets pepper sprayed in the face. You know,
right.
the kids weasel their way through the fence. I mean, they just slip right through this fence. And so we've got a big chase through the streets now of, you know, they're driving, trying to find Issa. Gwada can't see very well because he's been pepper sprayed. And so again, we've got this, are they going to catch this kid? What's going on? You know, because we know they need to resolve this issue. They need to get the lion because we know we've got the conflict between Zorro and the mayor. If this doesn't get taken care of, things could get heated in the community there. So great. There's a high incentive for catching this kid and getting this lion back. So they race, you know, through the streets, foot chase, finally get him. But then the mob of kids, come at them, like throwing like garbage, debris, rocks.
Yeah. Anything they can get a hold of.
Hold of, right, to push the cops back. They get Issa back. And in the confusion, tension, everything going on, the chaos of all of that, Gwada has basically like a concussive like flash gun that, you know.
Yeah, it's a flashball. Flashball gun, yeah.
Right. And is pointed at Issa and goes off at very close range. And Issa goes down. And the kids take off, and that's when they see that the whole thing has been filmed by a drone. That's Buzz's drone. Buzz's drone that's been flying above them. And we get to a really critical point here with the team because there's not an altogether agreement on what's going to happen. And Ruiz and Chris and Gwada sort of have it out in terms of what they need to do about this.
Qu'est-ce qu'on fait là? Qu'est-ce qu'on fait, putain?
Il respire encore.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais là?
J'appelle les secours.
T'es con quoi? Tu vas leur dire quoi? Qu'on a tiré sur un gamin?
Mais putain, on peut pas le laisser là, faut l'emmener à
On
l'hôpital.
va s'en occuper, ok? D'abord, faut gérer le drone.
Mais qu'est-ce que tu me parles de gérer un drone là? Il y a un gamin inconscient là.
Je te parle de Gwada, je te parle de moi, je te parle de toi, je te parle de notre équipe, ok? C'est ça la priorité. Si la vidéo elle sort, tous les trois on est cramés, t'as compris? Alors maintenant tu fais ce que je te dis, on se casse.
So this is, the priority is the team, right?
Apparently so. I mean, the commissioner earlier said as much, but in a particular case like this, it's like, wow. And I suppose this is the point to say, we find out that Chris had looked at Ruiz's file and found out that he had essentially turned some other people into internal affairs because of something. And it seems like he's the sort of guy who is ready to do that again because so much bad stuff is happening and these people are just doing everything poorly and the wrong way. And it seems like that's exactly what he wants to do here. And then you find all that out and then you have this whole situation with the drone and with the kid. It's like, what are we going to do? It's intense, to say the least.
There's no simple answers with this. I mean, there's been a string of bad decisions after bad decisions, but it's complex. I mean, it was chaotic, and you sympathize with Ruiz, with like, no, we've got to do the right thing, but that doesn't, what you think is the right thing may not be the thing that's going to get you the best outcome in this. And so the number one priority is we've got to get that video card. We've got to get that footage out of the drone. So we've gone from, as I said, very simple storytelling of like, we got to find the lion to, there's the kid that has lion. Let's get the kid. Okay, we've got the kid. Now, oh no, we've got to get the video card out of the drone. That's all it is. But unfortunately, the environment they are in is not going to make that as easy as just, we'll go talk to Buzz and we'll get him to hand over the video card, right? Because
exactly. Yeah,
the
we got to meet yet another group now to help figure this whole thing out.
Right. So they take Issa to like a nightclub type place, and they're gonna, they've got connections there. So this is another neighborhood element that's got influence, power, and can get things done.
And he seems like somebody, like the way that other people are talking, it seems like this might be the person who's like dealing with all the drugs in the area or something.
Yes.
Like I got a sense that he's doing drug or, selling
He's
all the
dealer.
drugs.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
So he knows people. He knows what's going on. Right. So we've got all of that going on. So then this,
they know who has the drone.
Right. They know who has the drone because, again, they know everybody that's in the neighborhood. So then it's a matter of, okay, who's got it? Now, as word gets out about the drone, this becomes like the leverage, right? We've got something on the cops. So you've got the mayor, you've got the Muslim brother, everybody that, has been in this sort of tenuous relationship with the police as the authority figure now has something on Chris and Gwada. So it doesn't make it as easy as just, we'll hand it over to them because they're the police and they're going to ask for it. And so we end up heading back to talk to the mayor. He wants to get it. He's going to have a conversation. He's going to head over to the deli to have a conversation with Salah and all of that in terms of what is best for the community in terms of who has that. So we deal with all of that. So cutting through all that very quickly, we get a resolution on this, right? We know Ruiz ends up with the card.
And that is one of my favorite scenes in the film. It's such a tense moment because you have all the elements there. You've got, I think you have all the elements there. You've got an element of the kids. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood. You've got the mayor. You've got the cops. You've got the drug guys. You don't have the circus representative there, I guess, but they're there because of partly because of that. But you've got this really intense moment because Chris just keeps ramping it up because, according to him, he's the one in power because he's the cop. But all of these other people, like they're the least in number always throughout this film, which I find very interesting. But what I love about the scene is the way that Ruiz kind of uses his logic and his just sense of being a good person and actually talks to Salah about this. And they have such an amazing conversation. And that, for me, that defines so much of this film. And I really love the conversation, the way it plays out. And I love what Salah has to say with him at the end there when he says, I want to trust you, but you won't avoid their rage, which is everything. Like that is everything.
Yes. No, Salah is, he is the wise man that knows and sees what is going on. He sees the way this is going to play out. He's a very wise man and sort of is the oracle telling us sort of what is to come. Because you would think that now in a typical storytelling, we get the card back. We have another very memorable scene, which is, okay, we get the lion, but Zorro, he wants to confront the thief, right? So the police bring Issa there to Zorro, and you think, okay, he wants an apology from the kid. This will be nice. And it becomes one of the most fraught and intense scenes because Zorro grabs Issa. They bring him into the cage with the lion, the huge lion, the full-grown lion, and it's just, and Ruiz is going to shoot the lion, and it's and it's a game.
Issa is scared to death because this lion is roaring and swiping at him.
Yes, exactly. And it's like the worst parenting ever, right? Of I'll show you not to do this again.
Oh,
and
geez, yeah.
It's just, but it's the adult of it's always about exerting power and control. And this is what Zorro is doing of I'm going to exert the power and influence I have and using the tools I have at my disposal to put this kid in his place so that I don't have to worry about this kid anymore. And it's just, I thought, okay, now we're done, right? Because then we get off that emotional roller coaster. Everybody goes home. It's sort of the end of the day. They decompress.
Yeah, it's a great. It's the nice kind of lull at the end of the second act that lets you kind of take in everything that you've just absorbed over the course of this day, this insane first day at work for Ruiz.
Yes, and you get a sense of everybody's home life. Chris goes home, and his kids are there, and Gwada's home, and but then we Gwada and Chris have a little meetup at a
Gwada
bar.
and Ruiz.
Oh, that's right. Gwada and Ruiz have a little meetup at the bar, a little conversation in which Ruiz, basically lets Gwada know that he knows the way those flashball guns work, and it's not possible for those things to accidentally go off. And he hands him the card, basically, and says, do with it what you what you need to do with this.
But he says, like, this was the worst day I've ever had on the job. Like, you two are the worst. Unbelievable. And it was a really good moment, especially because right before that we had a moment with Gwada and his mom. When he goes home to her, and he is just like, trying to hold back tears, just having a really hard time taking in the fact of just, he shot this kid and just everything that went on over the course of his day and how hard it really was for him. And so to go from that to having Ruiz call him to come to this bar and meet up, and then have basically kind of having him say, you're terrible. I know how these things work. All of this was just awful. I hated all of this. Here's the card. Do with it what you will. It's just one of those moments where it's like, really holding up that mirror for him.
Yes. So it's like, okay, that was one day, right? Worst day ever. So it's like, okay, next day, right? They're going to go on patrol. They're going to, just another typical day. It'll just be some small little things because we're not having to track down a lion, everything, smoothed over. And they get there and it's like the kids like rise up and it's this huge, like, assault, with first it's like with the squirt guns and they chase them and they sort of pin them in. And there's kids with like homemade, firecracker launcher
essentially
things.
Something like that.
And so they end up, Chris, Gwada, and Ruiz have to bail out into a building.
Well, they chase the kids first. The kids shoot this firecracker thing at their car, and then run into a building, and they jump out and chase, which puts them into the worst trap they could fall into. But I think it's important to note that this is a really interesting moment where because you see shortly after this, they're not just after the cops. Right. They are also taking down the mayor. They're also we don't see them with all of the groups. Like they don't do anything to Sala. They don't do anything to the circus people, which surprised me, honestly.
Right.
But
the drug dealer,
the drug dealer guy.
Teams come. Yeah, they stomp that car.
Yeah.
There's like a major revolt that happens.
Yeah. And I think if you think about it, and this is what I find interesting because, we'll get an interesting quote at the end of the film that I'm sure you'll talk about, but I find that it's just telling that over the course of this film, we have seen Issa. I mean, he's a kid. He's enjoying himself. He's loving this world of soccer and the World Cup and all this exciting stuff that's going on. But then it's like his father/stepfather is just kind of throwing him at the cops and abusing him stuff. And clearly, I mean, he's living in this neighborhood. He has a rough life. He's stealing things. I mean, he is a little criminal, but it is coming from the world around him. Yes. But then just the way that everybody treats him, like none of them are treating him like a kid, just letting him be a kid. It's all just this awful stuff that he's getting kind of beat up about from all angles. And so I think at this point, it's just like these kids have kind of, it really is this final revolt by the kids, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, and I guess, even Chris, like the day before, after the whole thing with the lion, because Issa's face is like swollen. I mean, he had it's the concussive force. I mean, he was unconscious, like a concussion. So his eyes swollen, all of this. And, Chris basically says, they're like, you're going to tell people. He
dumps him off.
He dumps him off and says, like, look, you tell people you fell down, basically. Like, that's, of like, this, this is done and this is the story you're going to tell. And the next day Issa is leading the revolt against all of this. And just an amazing, when I think of, we had this vast neighborhood that we were in the day before. Now the next day we're combined in the stairwell for this final confrontation of just getting hedged in and all the debris of, you've got shopping carts. I mean, things are blocked off and they just get pinned into a corner. And, they
have kids above them and kids below them in the stairwell, both throwing things at them.
Throwing things at them.
In, right.
The one door that might be able to, that they can get to is like buzzes That's where Buzz lives. He's not letting them in, and Chris gets hit with like a bottle or something. So
Chris gets hit with a bottle on the head, and then Gwada gets hit by, I don't know, like a pipe or something.
Yeah. So
the mayor comes running in, and he gets beaten. He gets beaten by all these kids and then thrown out the building.
Right. Exactly. So it's all the adults that were vying for power and control on this day, they lose all of that. And it builds to this point where Issa is at the top of the stairs looking down. He's got a Molotov cocktail, and Ruiz has his gun and is telling him, like, don't do it. And I thought, okay, where are we going to go from here? How are we going to resolve this? And that's when it just slowly...
Well, and there's like moments because it's like, oh, Ruiz, is he going to start lowering? It looks like he's calming down. Is he going to lower his gun? Yeah. Issa, is he looking like he's not quite sure?
Yes, it's
and then it fades to black.
And it's interesting because you don't see this a lot because it's not just like a. And maybe it's
not
because
a fade to black. It's really an iris.
An iris onto Issa's face, with the illuminated by the Molotov cocktail, and then it goes to black, and then we get this quote from Victor Hugo, and the English translation is. Remember this, my friends, there are no such things as bad plants or bad men. There are only bad cultivators. And so it's, people aren't born bad. They're made bad by their environment. And that it's a toxic environment for everybody because... I mean, it is hard to blame any one person for anything that happens. It is, and again, the complexity of the characters and the world that, for me, makes this such a rewarding story that you get to that point and you think, yes, you're absolutely right. There are so many things that went wrong that contributed to all of these people making these bad choices. But how do you break that cycle? How do you Issa's going to become the next leader in this neighborhood, and we look at all the adult influence around him. They're not positive influences.
No,
there's nothing redeeming anywhere. I mean, I think aside perhaps from the Muslim Brotherhood, that's the one sort of off to the side where we don't see them actively contributing to the chaos and violence in the neighborhood. But again, this is a complex issue with no simple answers. And I love that the film leaves us with that quote, leaves us with something to ponder.
Leaves us hanging in that way with that quote. I mean, it's a perfect way to end it. And I remember when I saw the end, I just immediately, I think I wrote in my first review, not since Inception has a film left me so frustrated by the way that it ends because it's just like, what's next? What's about to happen?
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, I don't need anymore because I've seen everything that I need based on the story and the quote and the way that this society has kind of built these kids, not just Issa, but all these kids to kind of be who they are. They've been built that way. And of course, this sort of thing is going to happen. And it really turned into a powerful, powerful moment that I felt like when I saw this end, I'm like, oh, that was the perfect way to end this. It's incredibly frustrating because it leaves people who really want resolution in their movies. You're going to get really frustrated because it's not wrapped up. There is no resolution. The resolution is just in the message that you get. And I just find that incredibly powerful. Yeah.
You need a well-constructed story to get to that point where it's going to end at a point and you can say, well, no matter what happens, there's nothing good that's going to come in any way. It's more chaos, more problems. And it's showing us that this is going to be a cycle. It's not going to be broken. It's not going to have a happy ending for anybody. There's no, magic resolution that's going to come in and solve all the problems. Whether Issa throws the Molotov cocktail or Ruiz shoots him or something else happens, we still have these people engaged in daily conflict with each other to struggle to maintain control and power in their lives. And that just is going to go on and on from day to day. And the fact that it did happen, as you said, that reminder of it happens in the shadow of, a sort of like national celebration of celebrating, as Issa's running with the French flag of something that unite people. And then just as quickly they're at each other's throats. over these things of just the things that are important to them in their daily life of survival will quickly, overcome that, national pride. And it's just, this is a powerful.
Incredibly.
Yes.
Yeah. Incredibly powerful. It was just like, I just was so impressed when I got to the end of this. I'm like, oh, that was so frustrating, but it for what I just watched, it absolutely had to play this way. If it wasn't for the fact that Parasite came out the same year, I would say give this all the awards.
Yes.
But Parasite, of course,
yes,
went and took them. So, and
yes.
I'm totally fine with that.
Yes, but this is one that, it's thrilling and engaging from beginning to end. There's nothing I could think of that I would do differently with this, because it's a great balance of action, story, and really compelling characters that I think are well written. I did see
great kid performances. I'm always impressed when I see performances from child actors that I'm just it's completely natural.
Yes.
Now, it looks like Buzz might have been the director's son, perhaps, same last name. So I'm just kind of making that assumption. Yeah. But Issa, who plays Issa, was just incredible. Like what a child performance he gave. It was really, really strong. Issa Perica. And I just felt like he absolutely should get any acclaim, just like the others. It's just a lot of strong performances here. There's
so much that works, and this is Lajli's, this is his first feature film. So I am all on board for whatever he's going to do next.
Give me more.
This was based on a short film. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's, basically, there's a lot of times the seed of the story is there, that this is the expansion of that. And sometimes that can work really well, and other times it can feel like, oh, well, you just padded out the story. This truly was the full realization of that story, of let's create some tension, and structuring it so well in the scope of the world that he created in that neighborhood. And I guess it's based on where he grew up, all of these things.
He grew up there. He was there with the riots, and he also grew up in that neighborhood and just has this real sense of that world. And I think he captures it incredibly well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing else that I can think to say other than, if you haven't watched it and we just spoiled it for you, go watch this movie right now and feel bad about having us spoil it for you if you have not seen it yet, because this is one that I, can't help but recommend to anybody. I think it's not comfortable to watch, but I think it's one that, for me, the importance of the questions it's going to get people to think about is more important. And I will say, I'll push people to be, you're going to be uncomfortable, and this may not be for you, but it should give you something to think about, because I think it's an important question to be thinking about in our world today, about kids and, so many things. I mean, I could probably, this is one of these films I feel like I could write an essay, of just like analyzing everything going on in this, on this film. I don't know if there was anything, that when you watch films, Andy, I know you often, you focus on the score and the music, and I didn't know if there was anything in this one that stood out to you in terms of the music.
Not in terms of the music. I thought it was fine. I thought it works well, especially in that last build there at the end. But I did just say, as far as the camera work, I did like the camera work. It had a very kind of raw feel to it when we were on the ground. But then I thought that was a beautiful contrast with the footage that felt, sometimes it is the actual drone, kind of, you're watching it flying very peacefully overhead. Sometimes it's just a helicopter shot designed to look like a drone, or who knows, maybe they were filming with drones. It's entirely possible. But regardless, just the contrast between the two, like being so peaceful when you're up above, but then so raw and visceral when you're down in it. I thought that was really impressive.
Okay. Well, I've had a great time talking with you about. We always pick good ones, Andy. We always have a good conversation when we pick movies to talk about.
Bring me back for another good one.
I will. Well, for our listeners, thank you for listening to Trailer Rewind. If anything we said here entertained, educated, or even enraged you, we'd like you to tell people about this podcast. Whatever your podcast listening platform is, please share, rate, or write a short review. It helps other podcast listeners find us. And if you enjoy connecting with other film fans, you can join us over on our community in Discord. It's free, and there's always an interesting dialogue or debate to jump into. Andy alluded to the whole like Amazon digital rights thing. There was a whole thing about that. There's always, believe me, there's always something about Disney Plus and that's something that they're doing or not doing that's going on there, or just great films that people have been seeing and sharing their reviews. So we'd love to see you over there in Discord. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure.
It absolutely has. Thank you for having me on. And for those people, if you are interested, thenextreel.com/Discord.
Hondo.